to some of the guys who, maybe watch masculinity style content or self-help style content, red pill content, whatever the case
Mhm.
may be. If you see guys who are motivated or they are wanting to become something and become more and they have ambition, but let's say they have no idea where to start, like they're a clean slate, somebody like you who's been through a lot of different things and seen a lot of different things, what advice would you give somebody starting from ground zero? Because what I constantly see on my channel that I've tried to explain to guys is like purpose is built, kind of brick by brick. Like the thing that you do today or the business you maybe start today or this year, or this couple of
Mhm.
years is probably not the thing you're going to be doing in 10 to 15 to 20 years.
Mhm.
What advice would you give to guys who say, oh, I can't find my purpose? I'm sure you've heard that one before. I have no idea what my purpose is. So they sit and they accept that they're stuck for 2, 3, 4, 5 years in a row.
Yeah. How old are you again, Casey?
25.
Yeah. So I mean, I've got like I definitely agree with you. It's built brick by brick, and I've got a lot of bricks. I'm close to 50, and I've seen and done a lot of stuff. So, um, it actually brings me to the point of one of the things that I'm working on this year. I'm actually putting together a course. I'm going to call it the School of Entrepreneurship, and I'm going to break down all of these elements, for the mindset. So what I'll do is I'll share some of that with you right now. I think if you want to start anywhere, I mean, like this is where I started anyway. So for those people that didn't have a entrepreneurial household, uncle, father, mother, grandparents, whatever, um, that's totally fine because the world's knowledge is available to you in books and podcasts. YouTube's a little bit difficult to filter through because there's a lot of shills out there that just press upload and really haven't got a clue what they're talking about. But I mean, if there's a published book by an entrepreneur that's successful, you can be damn sure that it's something worth, taking a look at. So some of the stuff that I'd recommend, consuming to sort of get your head screwed on right to set the frame for it would be something like Richard Branson's Losing My Virginity, Shoe Dog, which is a book on Nike, The Everything Store, which is basically a biography on Jeff Bezos on Amazon. Those would be the big ones to sort of get the idea of the sort of stuff that these guys had to do to accomplish what they accomplished. Because a lot of people look at stuff like that and are like, oh, well, that's an overnight success. And it's like, no, you don't understand. An overnight success that that most people look at that labels an overnight success. Like even you are nodding your head because I mean, like your grind was probably 1, 2, 3 years of like uploads with crickets before
Yeah.
you finally got traction, right?
Right.
And it's like
Exactly.
people only see you today. They only see you on your channel today. They only see you on social media, and they're like, oh, that guy, that guy got lucky, or he's an overnight success, but they don't see the grind leading up to it. So a lot of these books have that grind. And I
Mhm.
think that, the grind part of life is probably the main part that's missing in most men's lives today
Yeah.
is they don't understand what it takes to achieve success. And they don't often have, the gumption to actually go and do those things. So I'm going to frame all this thing in like different learning modules to like sort of break down all the stuff that I came across personally, and a lot of the stuff that I've seen a lot of the guys that I've mentor use.
Yeah.
But that's probably the best starting place is to consume biographies on the most successful. I mean, if you admire somebody else, like for example, if you're a basketball fan, a great book to consume, actually two of them would be Tim S. Grover, who's the author, who was also the trainer for Michael Jordan.
Okay.
And he wrote one, I think around 2011 called Relentless. And then the follow-up to that was called Winning. And I think that was out about a year or two ago. I've listened to them both on Audible. They're great books.
Hmm.
But when you listen to them, and I don't even like basketball, but when you listen to them, I mean, you really understand what it was that he and Jordan did and how they collaborated and how they worked together to have been as successful as they were, right? There's a lot of work that goes into success, right? People just see the results. They don't see the blood, sweat, and tears.
Right. So you left corporate America, you said in 2003, correct?
Correct.
So since then, I mean, if you're looking at like 19 years, how many industries have you pivoted into or businesses have you sold or different endeavors that's molded you into an entrepreneur?
Okay, so I've been involved in credit card debt relief, which is one of my more actually, definitely the most successful business in corporate world with employees.
Hmm.
I had a lead generation business, which didn't work out. That one folded within about a year and a half. I had a few other physical products that they just never went anywhere. I had a bad team. Got involved in a indoor go-kart track, which went absolutely nowhere. What else did I do? YouTube, obviously, which you can find out about. I've published books. Um, those would be the main ones that I can think of. I've also got a supplement line right now. I'm working on another physical product, which I'm collaborating with some guys in my community. So I'm just basically doing as much as I can with the time that I have. And then there's of course the passive stuff that I've built over the last 10 years as well, which lets me take these risks and these stabs so I can diversify in other things. So I've got passive income sitting in digital currency and real estate and investments and, like other businesses that I've also invested in that I'm not directly involved in, but I also get paid monthly dues on it as well too. So there's different places that you want to go once you've got that one success, the knock it out of park. I
Yep.
mean, I was lucky enough to have a good accountant that was like, okay, look, you've created this goose that lays a golden egg now every single month.
Right.
And you're very strong with cash flow, and we need to diversify. We need to create a hold co. We need to put some protective measures in place. We need to get this in some real estate, into an insurance, like all these different things that we ended up doing. I did that about 12, 15 years ago. So it was all part and parcel of good planning and making sure that I found the right people to come on the ride with me.
Yeah. So with that, like there's 2 points I want to make. So the first point I want to make is obviously to the people watching this, or to the guys who are watching this. One thing that stands out to me instantly is like your failed endeavor, like you had successes in business and then you had failed endeavors that
Oh
you're
yeah.
totally upfront with. But the thing that I notice is like a lot of guys, what happens is they hit their first train run of failure and they automatically assume that they're a failure or they don't keep going. So like I think the point to hammer home with that is like obviously like your evolution in business, it's full on continuing. And the second like you just stop at complacency or something like that, like that's what I see a lot of guys doing is they try one thing or they get enough courage to attempt something, and then because that one thing didn't work out, they oftentimes just go nowhere. You know what I mean? Do you see that too with some of the guys you've mentored?
Yeah, you're either growing or dying. You can't stay still. Like that's just the natural state of nature. I mean, if you look at a tree, I mean, it's either growing or it's
Yep.
dying, right? Like it never comes back in the spring, the leaves never come back, sort of thing. So, like as a living being here on this earth, I mean, we only have so much time. Let's just set aside whatever happens, when that time ends. But during that time that you're walking, you're either growing or dying. So you have to intentionally, walk through life in such a way that, you make decisions that are aligned with the sort of life that you want, right? Like you paint this picture of the sort of life that you want to create, and every single day you do something that gets you closer to that. Or if you find yourself doing things that aren't aligned with that because you've painted that picture and you've got clarity, then that's when you're like, okay, I need to stop doing this. This isn't a good use of my time. It's not aligned with where I want to go. A lot of people, to your point, they, when they reach a obstacle, then they usually just stop. I don't agree with everything that Ryan Holiday has written about. I'm not a fan of his Ego is the Enemy book, but I think his book, The Obstacles of the Way, is a fantastic book. It's one that I recommend because quite often an obstacle can become the way. So I'll give you an example. Like there was legislation that was introduced to Ontario Parliament here where I live in 2010 or 11,
Mhm.
which would essentially have put my debt business basically out of business. It would have delayed the first revenue event by about 8 months and cut the amount that we would have been paid by to about 1/3. Right. So that's crippling. Like that's a extinction level event. That's like a meteor hitting the earth and just, most of society stops. So we had to figure out how to deal with that because that was a serious and critical problem, right? We had 23 staff. We were doing close to $300,000 a month at that time in sales revenue. And we had a lot of customers. We had a lot of responsibilities. I had obligations to staff and vendors and rent and on all these other future payments that were due. So, through some hard work and some gumption, we found a way to make it work. And, long story short, most of the businesses that were in the industry folded or left Canada. And we were, I think, the only one that survived, if I'm not mistaken. Most of them that did try to push through the deadline date where the legislation changed the law either flopped within about 6 to 12 months or they just packed it in, fairly shortly. But I think it's been about seven years now past the legislative changes that the company's still been around.
Oh wow. Cool. So when guys when guys get into certain industries, or when guys, break through in a certain market, or like another thing too, I see with entrepreneurs is like they have a hard time seeing the vision of what could actually come with the fruits of their labor in either 1 year down the road from where they're at right now, or 2 years down the road. And maybe they're operating like they're working a lot, or they're operating at break even, or just slightly above break even. A guy like you who's been through different industries and you've seen different things, whether that be with like legislation, like you just said, or, selling businesses or trying different endeavors. When do you personally believe is the right time to pivot, right? And swap industries like that, or realize like, because I think entrepreneurs in general, I know I dealt with this too, like
Mhm.
especially with YouTube before I pivoted a little bit with how I was speaking and the types of videos I was doing. I
Mhm.
think entrepreneurs in general can be stubborn. Right. So if you do have any ego involved with it, with the, sometimes it's like the market that you're in. How do you personally know when to pivot and when to make those pivots versus sticking things out if you're potentially close to a breakthrough?
Yeah, I think that humans in general are stubborn when they're sort of set in their ways. And one of the key traits of every successful entrepreneur that I've met, and I've known a lot. I mean, I've been involved in Entrepreneurs Work Chapter in Toronto for a number of years. I've done other groups and mastermind groups, so I've met quite a lot of these guys. And the one common theme story is you have to know when to pivot. And the answer to the question, how do you know when to? It's really as soon as you realize that you have to do it, right? Um, like a great story that I love. And, like I only knew this story simply because I spent so much time consuming content, listening to podcasts, and like, basically watching what those that are chasing excellence do and then mimicking that. R&D doesn't stand for research and development. To me, it stands for rip off and duplicate.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you look at a great story, something like Netflix put Blockbuster out of business because they were delivering DVDs in the mail. They had lower cost of overhead, and their system was pretty much superior, right?
Mhm.
It had flaws, but it was a better system. So what happened? Blockbuster, literally the biggest movie rental business at the time, had to fold and close their doors and shut down all their retail operations. Well, now Blockbuster, sorry, not Blockbuster, but now Netflix had a new problem because we had the age of faster internet. More people had internet connections. We had consoles with apps. We had tablets and screens, and people were starting to stream content on devices. So rather than continue to ship DVDs to and from people in the mail, they're like, all right, let's set up a streaming service and let's pivot.
Yeah.
There's a great story, behind Instagram as well. Pretty much every successful business out there has a pivot story. And in some cases, it's not just one major pivot, it can be several.
Got you.